This is Inside Indiana Business Radio for Monday, February 10th, 2025. I'm Marek Mazurek. The CEO of Fort Wayne-based Do It Best Corporation says if the 25% across-the-board tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico go into effect, it would create an immediate impact on costs for the lumber and hardware cooperatives members. President Donald Trump said on February 1st that the tariffs were set to be implemented a few days later, but it was then announced on February 3rd that those plans were put on hold for at least a month. Do It Best CEO Dan Starr told Inside Indiana Business that the co-op's imports from Canada would be particularly hard hit.
Do It Best purchases from Canadian mills quite a bit of dimensional lumber shipped into the United States and then shipped into independent lumber yards and home centers across the U.S. That's millions and millions of dollars of product. Actually, it's upwards of more than $1 billion. So we would see an immediate increase in that the cost of product that would be routed from Canada.
Starr said even though the tariffs are on hold, the threat of such tariffs dating back to before the 2024 election has caused some price inflation. In anticipation of the measures, Starr said some members have been working on bringing in extra inventory ahead of time. They are also looking on sourcing lumber from other areas, particularly in the U.S. Grand Park Sports Campus in Westfield is finally seeing the financial results city officials anticipated more than a decade ago. The 400-acre sports complex now generates enough tax increment financing revenue to fully cover its debt payments, while its revenue reached an all-time high last year. Other cities have attempted to copy Westfield's approach with Grand Park, but none have managed to match the campus's stature in the youth travel sports world. There is plenty of skepticism about Grand Park before and after the youth sports mecca opened for business in 2014. The campus was billed as a way for Westfield to build a commercial property tax base that would relieve pressure from its largely residential taxpayers. Grand Park drew 1.3 million visitors in 2023, which made it the 16th most visited arena, convention center, or sports complex in the country, according to statistics provided by the city. Grand Park is now set to undergo a 10-year transformation with the construction of a new sports, entertainment, and business district near the park. From the #1 source for Indiana business news, this is Inside Indiana Business Radio.
To succeed, you need to stay informed. You need to be engaged. And let's face it, you need to set yourself apart from the rest by connecting with a company that brings you the best. Because in today's environment, business is an ever-moving target, and we'll help you chase it. IBJ Media. The best of business is in us. Get started at ibjmedia.com/youngprofessional.
Despite being a top priority for new Indiana Governor Mike Braun, Republican leaders in the General Assembly seem to be taking a more cautious approach to new state tax relief in budget discussions. House Speaker Todd Huston, for instance, pointed to an existing income tax phase-down already in law as a priority and noted that some agencies, like the Department of Child Services, will need additional funding. The state's income tax will continue to fall over the next 2 years, hitting a low of 2.9% in 2027. In contrast to the flush budgets during COVID-19, when federal funds and high spending buoyed state revenues, the next 2-year cycle will be much leaner, with discussions centered around warring priorities. With less than 1 month as the state's top leader, Braun has vowed to usher in a new era of austerity, curbing agency spending while simultaneously granting widespread tax relief. The cuts would reduce state tax revenue by almost $700 million over the next 2 years of the budget. To pay for that, Braun reduced various categories of state agency spending. Senate President Roderick Bray called Braun's budget, quote, aspirational, and said that he appreciated the leadership. Multinational corporations, homegrown companies, industry groups, advocacy organizations, local governments, lobbying firms, and others collectively spent nearly $30 million attempting to influence Hoosier lawmakers last year. The healthcare and energy industries figured prominently in that spending, according to the latest data from the Indiana Lobby Registration Commission. The commission regulates lobbying activity and reports that data. Anyone who spends more than $500 to, quote, influence legislative action, end quote, must register with the commission. Experienced lawmakers from both parties said lobbyists bring valuable information. Sometimes they even use their expertise to write legislation or contribute fixes. But they had varying takes on accepting lobbyist-funded dinners and gifts and on how well Indiana regulates money's influence on legislation. For a deeper look about how lobbyists work in Indiana, head to InsideIndianaBusiness.com. Farmers report missing millions of dollars of funding they were promised by the U.S. Agriculture Department, despite promises from the Trump administration that a federal funding freeze would not apply to projects directly benefiting individuals. On his first day in office, President Donald Trump ordered the Agriculture Department to freeze funds for several programs designated by President Joe Biden's signature clean energy and healthcare law, the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act. The freeze paused some funding for the department's Environmental Quality Incentives Program, which helps farmers address natural resource concerns. Funding also paused for the Rural Energy for America program, which provides financial assistance for farmers to improve their infrastructure. Farmers who signed contracts with the Agriculture Department under those programs paid up front to build fencing, plant new crops, and install renewable energy systems with guarantees that the federal government would issue grants and loan guarantees to cover at least part of their costs. Now, with that money frozen, those farmers are on the hook. Ball State economist Mike Hicks is this week's guest on the Business and Beyond podcast with Gary Dick, presented by PNC. A weekly conversation with high-profile Hoosiers in business, sports, entertainment, and beyond. Available now from your favorite podcast provider. I'm Marek Mazurek for Inside Indiana Business Radio On Demand.